It's a privilege to be here, and thank you, Bishop Matthews, and to all of you, the directors of the General Board of Higher Education and Ministry, the interim General Secretary, the General Secretary-to-be, and all of the staff. It is really good. As Cynthia and I came off the elevator, there was like this informal welcoming committee and gathered around, and it was just wonderful to shake hands and exchange greetings as we moved down the hallway toward this meeting room. Neil Alexander and I have been working together over a fairly protracted period of time. Neil's sitting in the back, as you may well know, and we're grateful for our partnership in the church's trust in us, along with many others, in the work of the call to action. And you've heard it referenced in nearly every report thus far, and there are some profound places of overlap. But let me see if I can walk you through the journey in just the time allotted. You will recall that when the call to action was issued at the May council meeting of 2009, that body, 2010, excuse me, in Columbus, Ohio, a group of folks went to work in that regard. And the first step in our work that was extended to us, the work that we were asked to do was to see what light we might shed and what attention we might bring and what recommendations there might be that might help the church to stop the downward trajectory in some of the things that are sign and symbol of our vitality. They're not everything that represent our vitality, but it is unmistakable that over a more than 4-decade period of time, the United Methodist Church in the U.S. in particular, would also be true in Europe, has faced enormous challenges around membership and around worship attendance and all of the things that the church is able to do as the result of those being upward trends. And so the question was put, if we're to change that trajectory in order to be, as a sign of our being more effective and faithful in the mission of making disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world, what would it look like? What could it look like? What do we need to know? What would it take to be a different church in that regard? Sometimes when we bring those kinds of stats into the light, it kind of gets us all into a pity party, and we were determined not to have a pity party, and we were determined not to sit there until we died, as the Samaritan leper said to his or her colleagues, why sit here until we die? And so we took that task up, and the Council of Bishops, along with the connectional table, assigned a group to work on that. And we began at the place of saying that if the primary locus of that mission is the local church, that's the place where disciples most likely are going to be made, if you will, and grow to maturity through the life of a continuing community like a congregation or a local church, then what does a vital local church look like in United Methodism, with a particular eye toward the United States? It took a little delicate negotiation around that, and some of the limitations of our area of focus were due to what we could do in the specified period of time, as well as the resources financially that were made available to us for the task. And so last summer, you saw released to the church 2 studies, one around congregational vitality, trying to determine if there were markers and signs of congregations that tended to be more robust and vital than others, and also around a kind of a organizational audit, if you will, an operational audit that addressed matters of relationship, of trust, about the use of resources throughout the whole system. And so that work was released as research, and it was done as much as possible as objective research. We didn't try to do it ourselves. We contracted with firms to do that. There are, of course, limitations whenever you define the parameters of what the research is going to be. We understand that, but we believe that we learned something and that it needed to be offered to the church. Now, the distinction needs to be made that the research itself is not the report of the call to action. The call to action report and recommendation that we brought into the fall meetings in 2010 of the Council of Bishops and the Connectional Table came in offering this for their consideration and saying that in light of the conversations and the learnings and the research that we have and have now offered back to the church, we want to further offer to the church this adaptive challenge. And this is how it reads, that the adaptive challenge, picking up on that Heifetz kind of notion of adaptive work as opposed to technical work and challenges, says, and I quote, "The challenge is to redirect the flow of attention, energy, and resources to an intense concentration on fostering and sustaining an increase in the number of vital congregations effective in making disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world." Now, one of the research reports had begun to identify some of the drivers that seemed to be present in congregations that had robust vitality. And those drivers, and you've heard them before, were effective pastoral leadership, including aspects of management, visioning, and inspiration, and good preaching, multiple small groups and programs for children and youth, a mix of contemporary and worship resources, and high percentages of spiritually engaged laity who assume leadership roles. And the term, use of the term leadership there is not about positional leadership, but it didn't exclude that, but about people who really lead and get things done in congregations, whether or not they have an elective office or whether or not they're a part of a group that has spontaneously, if you will, gathered around some felt need and mission. And as a part of our redirecting or inviting the church to redirect the flow of attention to this intense concentration on having more vital congregations, etc., we put forth one recommendation in 5 components. Now, as it's sort of made its way around the church, it sounds like 5 recommendations. So we don't want to argue about whether it's 1 or 5. We will say that the 5 are interdependent, and this is in the judgment of the call to action group that ceased to work, and another group has now picked up the ball. And those 5 pieces are, for a minimum of 10 years, beginning in 2011, use to best advantage the drivers of vital congregations as initial areas of attention for sustained and intense concentration of building effective practices in local congregations. Dramatically reform the clergy leadership, development, deployment, evaluation, and accountability systems. And we heard an excellent report in 2 parts from Dr. Carter and Bishop Hagee about the work of the Ministry Study Commission. Thirdly, collect, report, and review and act on statistical information that measures progress in key performance areas to learn and adjust our approaches to leadership, policies, and the use of human and financial resources, including indicators such as how congregations and annual conferences are increasing their effectiveness in implementing the 3 factors of the factors of vitality in congregations, which are attendance, growth, and engagement. I do want to say, when we talk about factors of vitality, one of the underserved factors, and one about which more needs to be said, and we intend to say more, partly because it's not only about data and statistics, but it's about how can we get a sense of, perhaps measure, though it can't always be quantified, what it is that gets folks engaged in the primary mission of the church as they participate in the congregation's life through worship and study and service and so forth and so on. The 4th piece of our recommendation was to reform the Council of Bishops, beginning with the active bishops assuming responsibility and public accountability for improving results in attendance, professions of faith, baptisms, participation in servant and mission ministries, benevolent giving, and lowering the average age of participants in the local church life, and establishing a new culture of accountability throughout the church. It was the feeling of the call to action that if we're going to have this robust conversation about a need for more accountability in all aspects or levels of the life of the church, that conversation needs to begin, though not be excluded to, the Council of Bishops as people who have been given a role in leadership, not as the only leaders, but certainly not as bit players in the life of our church. And finally, to consolidate program and administrative agencies to align their work and resources with the priorities of the church and a decade-long commitment to build vital congregations and reconstitute them with much smaller competency-based boards of directors in order to, my iPad is going crazy here. In order to overcome the current lack of alignment, diffused and redundant activity, and higher than necessary expense due to independent structures in the life of the church. To that end, the Council of Bishops and the Connectional Table have named jointly a interim operations team because at the end of the CTA's report, we said that who will pick up this work and continue to move us forward in this conversation and forward recommendations, perhaps legislation, though that is certainly not our only and perhaps not even our primary focus, because some of us, I would say Neil and I are among them, come to this with a bias that there are many things that the church can already do that do not need to come before the General Conference, meaning the permission is already there. We need the will to do it. Cooperation cannot be enforced by an edict from the General Conference. But, for example, bishops can choose to cooperate together in particular regions of the church and align around particular kinds of work. Agencies can choose to consolidate and to intensify efforts to best advantage. And that's what these tables around the four foci that Bishop Hagia was referring to earlier. And so the interim operations team has been established. We've had one meeting of the full group. In addition to myself, it includes Neil Alexander, as I said earlier, the president and publisher of our publishing house, Carolyn Bird, Global Tech Financial, formerly president of Coca-Cola Financial Corporation Atlanta, active member of a local church in Atlanta. Adam Hamilton, lead pastor at Church of the Resurrection. Laura Nickel, who is an executive coach and former senior vice president of human resources, Chase Bank of Texas. Gary Shorb, who is the president and CEO of Methodist Hospital in Memphis, Tennessee, and Carol Tuthill, who's a retired executive with Procter & Gamble with specialties in global diversity and organizational capability. And all of these folks are active United Methodists in their fields of service in congregations, or if they have a different role like bishops, in this case, in their annual conferences and throughout the church. So as we go forward, we look forward to continued input, continuing to be in the best way in the conversation with the whole church. And I love that wonderful illustration that Ken Carter gave us about stuff popping out from everywhere until it sounds like stereo, sound coming from different places. And as a part of not only seeking input, I want to acknowledge all of the inputs that have already been made. And sometimes we get wonderful inputs of people with emails or letters or calls saying, had you thought about this? We don't feel that the whole thing rests on our shoulder, that is redirecting the attention of the church, because of the other conversations and work groups and commissions that have been sent forth by the General Conference or by the collaborative work of agencies. And we see ourselves with, in some ways, as partners with all of those, and trying to see which pieces we can either say they're working on that and we need to pay attention and hear each other, but we don't need to put all of our energy into that and that kind of thing. I want to make sure that all of you are aware of the United Methodist Leadership Summit, an interactive video, a web-based conference that will take place on April the 6th. from 11 to 2 Central Time. And to find out more about it, if you've not already been invited by your bishop or your council director, you can go to UMC Leadership Summit, all one word. So www.umcleadershipsummit, one word, .org. And you'll find what we hope is a thoroughgoing explanation of that 3-hour video conference, which we hope you will do in community with some others so that you can be engaged in conversation and make inputs into this, hear what is being put out to the church through the work of the call to action, but most of all to engage at the local level about ways in which you can affirm things that you are already doing that is redirecting the flow of attention to more robust and vital congregations who are focused around the primary mission of making disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. We're grateful for this opportunity. Thank you, Bishop Matthews and the directors of GBHEM.